There's cooling towers, mostly for nuclear. Core plants have that. See those smokestacks? That from coal. So first of all, in Winnipeg, I just want to do a land acknowledgement. The top one is from the city of Winnipeg. I like this one, that our water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. That's in Ontario. That aqueduct or whatever was built about 100 years ago and still working fine. This I took from the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce website, and this to say that I respect our treaties and that kind of thing. So and hopefully we live up to it. So, all right, this is Dr. Brian Cox, is a science communicator from UK and is pro-nuclear energy. That's of course why I'm including him. But also I really like this saying. Real scientists are delighted when they find out they are wrong. And to me, that is one of the greatest gifts that a scientific education can bring. There are too many people in this world who want to be right and too few who just want to know. All right. So I desire for all 8.2 billion people to live a good life, supplied entirely by clean energy. All right. Human beings use energy. What is the current population, global population? What are the growth rates? So this vertical is how many years it takes to grow a billion people. And these you can see go from 1 billion, 2 billion, et cetera, et cetera. So, from 1 to 2 billion, it took 120 years. And then we see from 7 billion to 8 billion, it took 12 years from 2023. But then we see from 8 to 9, we expect that to be 14 billion. And then from 9 to 10, 21 billion. So obviously population rates are declining, and a peak at 10.4 billion. So anyway, we need to know this because the more people we have, generally speaking, the more energy we consume. What is the number one source of global energy? Renewables, coal, oil, gas. I'll just take a sip of water and you can take half a second to think. And of course, the answer is oil. More so energy additions than energy transitions. Now on this graph, we see years, 1800 to 2023. And here we see terawatt hours of energy from 20,000 to 160,000 in 2023. And so, we say more so energy additions because look at even biomass. We're still using the same amount as we did in, over 200 years ago. Coal, of course, is growing. Oil growing. That's our number one. Gas, big growth in gas. Little bit of growth. Well, nuclear there and hydro. You see there just little wee bits, solar and wind. And you see these dips here. Of course, that's COVID. When economy drops, so does energy. All right, these are just units we're going to use. A kilowatt is 1,000 watts, a megawatt, 1,000,000 watts, gigawatt, 1,000,000,000 watts, terawatt, 1,000,000,000,000 watts, that kind of thing. So, all right, a picture is worth 1,000 satellite image at night. Northern country has 26 million people. South country has 51 million people. So these 51 million people obviously use a lot more energy than these 26 million. What are we talking about here? Which countries? Anyone?
Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. North Korea and South Korea. You're right. Yeah. So see how important energy is. You don't have energy, you live like this.
Wow. Okay.
There's another example from a satellite. There's Europe. Obviously they've got a good economy, and energy poverty is really poverty. That's my opinion. And of course, this is Northern Africa. There's hardly any lights there at all. Of course, we see, I guess, Cairo here. Here's Israel, I believe. So yeah, it's a satellite image at night, EU and North Africa. The energy poverty is obvious. And while we're on the subject of satellite images, April 28th, 2025, this is the Iberian Peninsula, that blackout. As you can see, yeah, that was a blackout, all right. Cars at least were running and got their batteries charged. So I'll just read a bit. At 12:38 p.m., with over 82% of generation at this point now inverter-based, that is converting direct current to alternating current electricity, these being wind and solar and batteries as well, and few synchronous units available, such as coal, gas, nuclear, hydro. The system became stiff to voltage control. The stage was set for this blackout. So, All right. So since that blackout, we've seen, we can see here the tide is turning in Europe and beyond in favor of nuclear energy. Now, this gentleman, he's an investor in nuclear companies. Here's some of the things he's seen since that blackout. There's also the World Bank has lifted its ban on nuclear energy. In March 2025, Africa commits 105 billion to nuclear energy. And then you can see X, or formerly Twitter, threads on May 9th and June 13th of Eva Busch. She's Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, Minister for Energy, and the Minister for Business and Industry. Her X threads on May 9th and June 13th lists even more. And then this year, of course, on July 7th, the EU commits to 240 billion euros to nuclear to the year 2050. And even the small country of Estonia, they abandoned their 100% renewables plans, and nuclear energy is now their priority. All right, now what would a presentation be without a picture of the Premier of the United States of Lower Canada? Are there any Americans here? I don't mean to offend, but anyway. Where does the black, heavy, sour crude come from? Well, that comes from mostly Alberta. Where does the gold, light, sweet crude come from? Fracking in the USA. Which one does the USA refine into gasoline and diesel? Mostly this one. Well, if they have this one, and why do they refine this one? They refine Alberta's black crude because they ran out of their own oil in the late 70s and early 80s from conventional oil drilling before fracking was available. So they had to convert refineries to black, heavy, sour crude, and of course import. But wait, there's more. This is called the depletion paradox. These guys are quite the natural resource investors. They do deep dives into the data on this stuff. The yellow highlight, it says, recent data from Energy Information Agency reveal that shale crude oil production reached its high water mark in November 2023, only to slide 2%, roughly 200,000 barrels per day since then. So this is from December 19th. So in a year, it slid 2% the production. So, I think we can understand maybe why there is the talk of 51st state, why they want to take over Canada. But if they try anything, run, Premier, run. Okay. All right, this is a slide. Well, let's replace fossil fuels potentially with alternatives. There's one here, sustainable aviation fuels. This one is Syntholine. The starters of this company, they also did terrestrial energy, a nuclear energy company. I kind of like this point 2. I can't really read it too well, but basically it says, don't retrofit your current vehicles that take diesel and gasoline and jet fuel. These guys claim they'll be able to supply their own CO2 negative replacement fuel. So they claim that they'll suck more CO2 out of the atmosphere, combine it with water and heat in their technology, and out comes fuel that will burn and produce less CO2 output than what they suck in. That's what they're claiming. I actually had a talk with them just this past week. So Syntholine Energy. Edison Motors in Merritt, BC, they're making diesel electric trucks. So they are, the diesel is just like, I guess, trains, right? The diesel engine is there only to charge the battery. That's all it does. So in other words, it's not going to be going up and down in RPM. So the diesel engine itself would last longer. It's always going to be at a constant RPM. It'll kick on when the battery needs charging and simply shut off when it doesn't. So they don't see too much of a change in long distance trucking, but like say inner city, or maybe, from Calgary to Edmonton or something like that, they think that could be like a 60+% saving in fuel. These guys, they're talking about doing ethanol and methanol. It's kind of interesting. Now, this graph shows net volumetric energy density. So megajoules per liter, and this is megajoules per kilogram. So obviously the top, the more you are to the top and more to the right, the better your energy density. This alternative's not too bad. This not very good. Low energy density on volumetric and gravimetric. So not really very good. Now look at where batteries are. right down in the lower left corner.
Very bottom.
Yeah. So this here's a company out of Ontario. They're doing a demo in Manitoba. They're going to make ammonia. I guess for now they're using renewable energy. Whoops, sorry. Anyway, page up there. Sorry. Yeah, they're doing a demo in Manitoba right now, and we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, there's different ways of producing ammonia besides burning fossil fuels. That's coming. So they're currently doing it today in Manitoba, at least on a demo basis. So. All right, quiz number 2. Of the 8.2 billion of us, how many have sufficient electricity supply for fridge, stove, washer, dryer, microwave, air conditioning, heat, internet, smartphone, computer, career, education, manufacturing, industry, etc., etc.? I'm going to take another sip of water.
A or B?
What do you think the answer is? Well, we're going to go with B. 2.9 billion out of 8.2 seem to have sufficient, at least, electricity. So all these folks, there's obviously the majority of us people are living basically in poverty, aka energy poverty. So minimal electricity means no education, because people, mostly women, need to haul water and collect wood and dung for heat, cooking, boiling water, washing clothes by hand, etc., and don't have time for education. Watch Hans Rosling's TED Talk, The Magic Washing Machine. And also in the bottom right here, you can see primary energy consumption per capita in 2023. So global average 77. Europe is 115 above average. Look at us North Americans, good grief. Now look at Africa. Now this is unacceptable. We need, if everybody used the proper amount of energy and everybody had a good life and had all those modern conveniences, we'd actually be using 4 times as much energy as we are today around the world. So all the more reason that we need, in my opinion, nuclear energy.
Yep.
All right. What is the #1 source of global electricity generation? Before we asked energy, now we're asking specifically electricity. Coal, gas, renewables, nuclear. One of those hits the news a lot. Coal doesn't, but of course it's #1. Yeah, coal just keeps on growing. That's from the year 1985 to 2023, and this graph goes up to 30,000 terawatt hours, which now at 2024 we've essentially hit that. I just saw some stats released earlier this week. We certainly have surpassed the 30,000 terawatt hour mark, and coal, oil, gas continued to grow again in 2024, as of course did GHG emissions. So, the fossil fuels dominate here too. Interestingly, oil, our #1 energy, doesn't do much for electricity because it's mainly diesel generators on islands, remote communities, that kind of thing. So anyway, we gotta do a lot more of this stuff. Hydro, though, is just about tapped out. So now also remember that number for a later slide, 30,000 terawatt hours. Okay, to meet Paris climate targets, electricity grids must emit less than 100 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, averaged on an annual basis. So the shorter these vertical bars, the less the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. Life cycle meaning, say, for example, coal or even nuclear, like how much material do you have to dig out of the ground, how much energy to put these materials together, like concrete building for hydro dams and nuclear and that kind of thing. And then its use, like nuclear is low, as you can see here, mainly because it lasts a long time. Like it'll last probably 80 years. Wind and solar, there's different types of solar here. Geothermal is not bad. And of course, biomass, that's renewable energy as well, but not very clean. Now, the US, they actually did the most CO2 emission reductions of most any country in the last probably 10 years. Reason being is because they converted a lot of coal to natural gas. Now, still obviously not good enough to go to 100, but pretty significant drop anyway. Still a long more to go, but I think we have to be acceptable to take interim steps. The perfect is the enemy of the good. If we think we can go from 820, a lot of coal, right down to nothing and still maintain our same lifestyles, that's just not going to happen. All right, now which regions have already hit this target of less than 100 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, average on an annual basis? and with at least 5 million people in servicing this grid. So Norway, about 5.6 million people, they do mostly hydro. Finland, mostly nuclear with hydro. Switzerland, hydro with nuclear. Sweden, hydro, nuclear. Ontario, mostly nuclear. France, mostly nuclear. Brazil, mostly hydro. I don't know if you started to see a theme there, but it seems like the only words I mentioned and needed to is nuclear and hydro. Two regions they missed. Oops, sorry, did that again. Two regions they missed were in Manitoba, or sorry, in Canada, were British Columbia and Quebec. They both do lots of hydro, and they both, of course, have more than 5 million people. So let's compare some other, we hear a lot about Germany, how much they've spent, but, they're not on here. France is, don't hear much about them. From the 1 year, February 2024 to February 2025, that whole year, on average, France did 49. Germany did 452. Not really very close to the Paris targets. And coal's still king coal in Germany. Gas is right up there too. Wind's getting there, but we got to get rid of this stuff. France, on the other hand, there's some clean energy, nuclear. So France, actually, they hit the Paris target 40 years ago when they wanted energy independence and chose nuclear. They don't have fossil fuels to pull out of the ground, so they decided to go nuclear. They just used the stuff that the states invented and created. They didn't invent anything. They just, hey, why reinvent the wheel? Germany spent $500 billion in the last 25 years, and they're nowhere close to that Paris target. All right, how much land does your electricity use? So land used per megawatt hour of electricity. This is pretty obvious. Nuclear being energy dense uses the least. Natural gas, pretty energy dense too. Hydro, that's for the large plants. Solar, well, it doesn't produce at night and all that. So coal with all its, and this says plus CCS, which is a non-existing technology right now. Will it ever exist? That's carbon capture and sequestration. So as you burn coal, as all the CO2 goes into the atmosphere, you're supposed to catch it and sequester it underground. Well, that's not ready. We don't know when it will be. So coal power on its own is way more than this. Hydro, the smaller dams, and then wind power. Now, look at wind power compared to nuclear for the same amount of electricity produced. This, of course, this varies, like on farmers' fields if you're doing not too bad, but I've seen one in upper state New York where they were just hacking down forest like crazy. It was just awful. And of course, this solar PV, this is solar farms, not rooftop solar, but anyway, you get the point. So, and also hydro likely does not account for long distance, high voltage DC transmission lines and all the land to be expropriated, the concrete, steel, aluminum, etc. that's required. And speaking of energy density, batteries. How much global electricity generated by storage? Batteries, or BESS, battery energy storage systems, by 2030. Well, this article from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, November 21, figures by 2030 we'll have 358 gigawatts, 1 terawatt hour by the end of 2030. And this will, over that 8-period time frame, be $262 billion. How much global electricity generated by storage batteries by 2030? At the end of 2024, there was 150 gigawatts and 363 gigawatt hours globally. So now what did we say, how much electricity was generated globally in 2024? We said 30,000 terawatt hours. So here by 2030, we expect these batteries to produce 1 terawatt hour. 30,000. Not too impressive. All right. How much global electricity generation was supplied by batteries in 2024? 3%, 2%, 1%, or less than
D.
A, 3% by batteries? All right. Like I said, though, 30,000 terawatt hours and only 1 terawatt hour by 2030. So the answer, of course, is less than 5%. But with batteries, it's kind of hard to tell because, how long do they output electricity for? Is it 4 hours, 8 hours? How long do they take to charge? How many cycles of charging and how do you say, outputting electricity? So So anyway, still on the topic of batteries, this Northern California battery fire, January 2025, Moss Landing. I think that was a gigawatt worth of batteries there. The fire emitted tons of carcinogenic metals and toxic gases. Evacuation was required. Lawsuits are pending. Health issues, land unusable. And Erin Brockovich was involved in this. She was that one. She's always been environmental. I think there was even a movie starring Julia Roberts, I think, about her. So anyway, now we talked about the electricity grids. We talked about the Iberian blackout there and a lack of synchronous generation or synchronous inertia. Too many inverter-based resources. That's wind, solar, batteries. That is too many DC to AC conversions, direct current to alternating current conversions, not big synchronous inertia. So maybe something like this, a synchronous condenser needs to be deployed, or synchronous condensers, to make sure that our frequency stays within tolerable range, and voltage as well for that matter. So if you want to do a high wind solar batteries, you better be prepared to spend a lot on something like this. There could be some other solutions in the future. Right now, there is not. So power engineers recommend no more than 30% of your electricity per year generated from wind solar batteries until this issue is solved. We need tight tolerances on our frequency. We've got to keep it there. All right, and then speaking of storage, this is Bill Gates with his I think it's some kind of molten salt reactor. It's called Natrium. This is a project they're doing. I think it's in Idaho. And also their storage is not electricity like a battery, but instead it's molten salt that stores heat. So a nuclear reactor produces heat to boil water to turn a steam turbine that's connected to an electricity generator. Well, same idea with the heat from here. All right. Mining requirements of electricity sources, including gas. So for coal, look at all this stuff we got to mine. This is per gigawatt hour. Gas, we got to mine this much per gigawatt hour. Wind onshore, solar PV, batteries, etc. And of course, nuclear, that's the EPR. That's a French light water reactor. The AP1000 is the US Westinghouse. Of course, nuclear wins this simply because it generates so much electricity for so long of a time. Like for 80 years, they run it, they're running like 90% of the time. So that's the key, is unit of electricity produced as opposed to capacity deployed. But so unit of electricity produced is important. That's why these numbers are low. All right, on the left, the shorter bar, the safer per terawatt hour. We already talked about these ones here, amount of greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour. So this is how many accidents per unit of electricity produced. Coal, of course, is a big one because of its pollution, and oils up there, natural gas, biomass, again, with its toxic air. Hydro, there was a dam in the 70s that broke in China that flooded, I think 173,000 people died or something like that, 1 million people displaced. So when hydro breaks, it's big. Wind, nuclear is way down here, again, per unit of energy produced. Now, nuclear, some even have a dispute that this number is too high. We might get to that later. And solar, I guess, sometimes when people deploy solar panels, they fall off roofs. And wind turbines, when some folks are maintaining these things, the odd time we see them start on fire up there. So even when earlier this year, there was 2 people somewhere in mid-USA, they perished. The turbine was on fire. They were way up there, so they either burned to death or fell to their death. Yeah. Now, this is cost comparison of electricity generating technology. We often hear that certain generating technologies are cheaper than others, and they often quote this report from Lazard, Levelized Cost of Energy. I'm not sure why they say the plus, but there's some caveats in their report that this is from their report itself, page 7 of their 2025 report. Their prices per unit of energy produced are only a snapshot in time. So, for example, how much does it cost to purchase solar electricity from 11 p.m. till 5 a.m. So it's unavailable to purchase. So now this one, on the other hand, beyond LCOE, says we have to price it out like jurisdiction specific and system level analysis of the whole system. So when you have, solar and wind that don't produce all the time, maybe you need batteries, but you have to meet requirements of 24/7, 365 electricity delivered, uh, supply matching demand all the time, tight tolerances on frequency and voltage. Those all cost and they have to be included, but they're not here. So when people quote this and say solar and wind are the cheapest, well, it's only when they actually produce. It's not the full 24/7, 365 and meeting all requirements. All right. Sometimes we hear fossil, aka natural gas fatalities versus 3 Mile Island. We've heard of 3 Mile Island, of course. The worst that happened was people were exposed to one CT scan versus equivalent of radiation. But here's natural gas just in 2023 in the US. 6 people died here. How come Rustic Ridge? Shouldn't we be hearing of Rustic Ridge more than 3 Mile Island? Guess not. Here, 4 family members, 1, 2, blah, 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 etc. So obviously, we need to understand radiation better, because if this is known more than any of these, then there's some misunderstanding going on here. All right, to get to zero fossil fuel production by 2032, I think it is, 2050, 2080. So we're supposed to go from like 42 gigatons per year of CO2 emissions to zero, to keep it at 1.5 degrees Celsius of rise in temperature from the start of the Industrial Revolution 300 years ago to now. So if we want to keep that rise to 1.5, we have to go to zero by 2032. We can't mine enough raw materials out of the ground to do this. This is, I think even last year it was 1.5 anyway.
Yeah.
So that one's pretty much gone. 1.7, that's going to be tough as well. So, all this, as we can see, we have more people. Our population continues to grow, as we saw earlier, and we're very much under energied around the world. So this is going to be a tough one too. Hopefully we can keep it to 2, So switching topics now to nuclear energy and radiation. So radiation is closely associated with nuclear energy, medical procedures, etc. People don't really know this too well, but natural radiation's everywhere. Plants have it. Like people who sleep with someone else are exposed to more radiation than people who sleep alone, for example. So it's just all over the place. It's just constant. And this shows elevation. So the higher the elevation, the thinner the atmosphere, and therefore the less protection from cosmic radiation. All right, these are radiation dose rates in millisieverts in Canada. As we can see, for us Canadians, an annual public dose rate limit, 1 millisievert. And then we talked earlier about 3 Mile Island. Whoops, sorry again. 3 Mile Island and chest X-rays. Or CT scan, 7 millisieverts. So that's what happened at 3 Mile Island, 7 millisieverts. Now, when we get radiation treatment at that one time, we get 1,000 millisieverts. So it's no wonder people come out of there, in pretty rough shape and really try and avoid this. So, radiation obviously can do damage. I do find this interesting, though. Annual public dose for typical Canadian is 1 millisievert. But if you sign on the dotted line and become a nuclear energy worker, suddenly you can handle 50 millisieverts, not 1, but 50, just because you signed on the dotted line, I guess. I don't know what happens when you sign on the dotted line that you would suddenly get more, but and then a dental x-ray 0.005, but we put on lead vests anyway. Hot springs are 0.1 millisievert. So how about we put on lead vests when we go into hot springs? Just stay out of the deep end, please, for heaven's sakes. So, all right. Nuclear energy produces radiation. Metabolism and radiation cause DNA damage. So we have approximately 30 trillion cells in our body. Each and every one of those cells experiences from 20,000 to 60,000 single-strand breaks per day and 8 to 50 double-strand breaks per day. This is all caused by metabolism, which has been occurring since animals first existed on this planet. So I guess this DNA damage and repair. What's that? 1 billion or so years. I'm not sure how long we've had animals, but anyway, but we didn't know this, that metabolism caused this DNA damage and repair maybe until, I'm not even sure exactly, but maybe the 1970s. I can't remember exactly. So, we were doing radiation standards before we knew this. Now, for radiation to cause this much DNA damage, we would need to be exposed to 250 millisieverts per day. So what did we say on
per day?
There's 1 millisievert per year is we're supposed to be exposed to, and there it's 250 per day. So we start to detect harm at 20 or so millisieverts per day in us. At that point, the cell is forced to deal with a number of double strand breaks that is too high above normal. And at that point, the double strand breaks don't get repaired properly. And that really is the cause of cancer, when our double strand breaks don't get repaired properly. That's really the main cause of cancer. All right, so next is, all right, this eye chart here shows these are man-made radiation exposures like X-rays and PET scans and CT scans. And I focus on the bottom more. These are naturally occurring radiation. I highlighted a few here. Garapari, Brazil, the beaches on their east coast, they get to 70 millisieverts per year. Us Canadians are only supposed to be 1 millisievert per year. If we're a nuclear power plant, 50. I guess we're not supposed to go to this beach. But they even get up as high as, and people hang out on this beach on a regular basis, as high as 438 or 40 millisieverts per year, which is what Chernobyl was in 1987, 1 year after the Chernobyl accident. So, how bad is this 438 millisieverts per year? Well, on that other slide, we said that humans can handle about 20 millisieverts per day. So this is 438 per year. So, this was really a problem. Now, another one here I like to highlight, Fukushima City, 29 days of accident after the accident. It was at that time 4 millisieverts per year. You know where else is 4 millisieverts per year? Right where I'm sitting. So anyway, we need to understand radiation better than we do now. So, all right, one more here. Now this other eye chart, green is highlighted those people who survived their radiation exposures. The top level is radiation dose received all at once, basically acute. And the bottom part is radiation dose received evenly over protracted periods. So in other words, chronic, I guess. So these, some of these, one I wanted to highlight was Louis Slotin for us Winnipeggers. I took this picture where they had a memorial for him. He worked at the, what do they call it? The Manhattan Project. So he passed on in 1946, I guess after World War II, but I guess they're still obviously working on these things. So some working on the nuclear bomb, something went really bad. He decided to put himself over top of the bomb, and in the one person in a matter of seconds got 21,000 millisieverts of radiation. Now, him being a Canadian is supposed to get 1 millisievert per year as opposed to 21,000 in seconds. And of course, he died 9 days later. I can't imagine what those 9 days were with that extreme dose, acute radiation poisoning there. Another guy, Eben Byers, he won the United States men's amateur golf championships in 1905 and 1906. Now, if you can spend that much time on a golf course and win amateur championships, you're probably doing all right. And in fact, his dad was a steel magnate. And in the 1930s, he took over his dad's business. And there was a big radiation quackery going on then. So he bought a whole bunch of Radithor. He drank this stuff. It was supposed to, the fountain of youth and all that stuff, it was supposed to, stop you from aging and even get younger. So he drank this stuff for 2 years. And because of that, he got exposed to 366,000 millisieverts of radiation from this stuff. So like per day, this guy was getting like approximately 300 millisieverts of radiation per day. Whereas we've seen We can handle 20 millisieverts per day, but 300, nope, horrible bone cancer. Died in 3 years. His bottom jaw fell off. Another one here in the green. In other words, they survived. People in the Taipei apartments with the high dose of radiation, about 1,100 people, 18 years. That's a cumulative dose over those 18 years. But per day, they would get up to 3 millisieverts per day, as opposed to, I guess they weren't Canadians because they were only supposed to get 1 millisievert per year. Anyway, these folks actually were healthier than the typical population in Taipei. Now, why were they healthier? Some people believe it's hormesis, as in hormesis radiation exposure could potentially stimulate your DNA repair systems, somewhat like a vaccine can stimulate your immune system. Now, is that why they were healthier? We don't know. We don't know. Did they have a much healthier lifestyle, or bottom line, we don't know. But the other bottom line is up to 3 millisieverts per day didn't do them any harm whatsoever. All right. Should all doses and dose rates of radiation be considered dangerous? Yes, no, or don't know. Take another sip of water here.
Well, low.
All right. The answer is don't know, but leaning towards no. As we just saw earlier, the Taipei people, 3 millisieverts per day, well, they are actually healthier. So what happens if we create a lab with almost no radiation? What if we do that? At the Northern Ontario School of Mines in Sudbury, Ontario, the snow lab is 2 kilometers below the surface to avoid as much cosmic radiation as possible. And there's a lead box to conduct experiments in. So, we hear all radiation is dangerous. It's all scary. Well, to avoid radiation, this is the extremes they had to go to actually avoid it and do this experiment. So they haven't really got any results. A minor one they got is when yeast is cultured on the surface and compared to yeast cultured in this lead box in the snow lab, preliminary results show the yeast on the surface survives better. So that's all I could see so far. So yeah, so we've been exposed to radiation, all living things, for billions of years. Radiation is constant around us, so obviously we've adapted to it. So if we're exposed to no radiation, well, that's very, very unusual for us. We're not adapted to no radiation. So that's actually probably a more dangerous situation, I guess, in my opinion. Still to be proven, but they're working on it. Cancer link estimates on Earth. Ionizing radiation is a small percentage, as we can see here, of cancer causes. It is important to put ionizing radiation in perspective with tobacco and viruses and viruses, lack of heavy exercise, alcohol, lack of fruit and vegetables, obesity. And Jeff will like meat is included in here. Maybe it should be a higher number, but it's certainly more than ionizing radiation. Just eating meat, like red meat, is don't eat that very much. UV radiation as well, of course. People get sunburns from that stuff, so that's more bothersome to us than ionizing radiation. All right. No Nukes concert, 1979, but now attitudes are starting to change, at least. Scientists and engineers in 79 and around there, they wanted nuclear energy, but the musicians, actors, Jane Fonda, and activist Ralph Nader, they had louder voices. So instead, well, they started shutting down, stopped nuclear power as it's being built, and instead, we got coal installations. So here in 1980, this says the dark are currently operating without announced retirement date, and the blue one's currently operating but has announced retirement date. I don't know what that is. So here we are. These ones built in 1980. They built 16 gigawatts right after that No Nukes concert, 16 gigawatts of coal, and 12 gigawatts of coal just from 1980 is still running today. I think coal's more dangerous than nuclear, just my personal opinion. So darn it, next time on Matters of Science and Engineering, instead of listening to actors and musicians, hey, let's listen to scientists and engineers. 97 gigawatts of coal was built in the 15 years after No Nukes. All right. This is Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant in New York State. That's 46 years of spent fuel there. That's about 0.36 millisieverts per day. We were talking about per year, so I can't remember. But anyway, remember we can handle up to 20 millisieverts per day. So this is 0.36. Oh, and that orange plate there, 1930s Fiesta. Oh, that's 0.48 millisieverts per year that we've eaten food off of is more radioactive than these things here. So now this nuclear power plant got shut down a few years ago. It was supposed to be replaced by energy efficiency and renewables. Instead, it was replaced with fossil gas, and CO2 emissions went up 7%. Now, if this was a coal plant, this pile would be like this depth, this width, but the height would be 2,100 meters. So, oops, again. All right, storage of spent nuclear fuel. This is from Northern Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Canada. It's being planned for Ignace, Ontario. They're going to bury this stuff. Like here goes into the fuel pellets, go into fuel rods, which goes into this, whatever it is, and then goes into some concrete, and then this there. It's just buried, and we won't be able to get to it. Now, these guys, Deep Isolation in the States, they haven't come into production yet, but their plan is to put the waste in things like this. And then if we want, we can take this stuff out later on, and we'll talk about why we would want to do that. Okay, I'm going to take a drink of water. Is nuclear waste radioactive for 100,000 years? Yes or no?
Well, yes.
Actually, technically, the answer is no. 100,000 years. Why would it not be radioactive after 100,000 years? Technically, it is radioactive forever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so for practical purpose, spent nuclear fuel remains radioactive forever. However, the penetrating form of radiation is essentially gone in 600 years. After 600 years, the spent fuel must be swallowed to be harmful, but that would require eating rocks. Bacon, Jeff, you hear me here, Jeff? Bacon is probably more dangerous than aged nuclear fuel. So, all right, spent nuclear fuel in perspective. This is typically how much waste we produce in our lifetimes. You know, we take the garbage to this road and all that stuff. And whereas if our whole life was powered by whole energy was powered with nuclear, that's how much waste we produce with nuclear energy waste. I put radiant here because this is Radiant Nuclear, the company. This is a graph I stole from them. So a typical Western lifestyle leads to approximately 26 metric tons of waste over a lifetime. If all the energy of that lifestyle was provided by nuclear, the waste for all of that energy would be 0.23 kilograms over a lifetime. Now, there's currently 400,000 tons of nuclear waste from 60 years of nuclear electricity production all over the world. 400,000 tons. Yikes, that's lots. We create this much waste all over the world from burning coal every 30 minutes. So, yeah, 400,000 tons from burning coal all over the world every 30 minutes. There's some more perspective. All right. Understanding uranium enrichment. I'm not an expert at this, but I'll give it a go. Natural uranium comes out of the ground with mostly uranium-238 atoms, the blue ones, and just a little bit, 0.7% of uranium-235 atoms. The CANDU reactors in Canada, they use natural uranium. They don't enrich it. But in doing so, we have to use what's called heavy water. So not typical water like most nuclear reactors all over the world today. So it costs money to produce heavy water, but it seems to be a lesser evil as compared to enriching uranium. So most nuclear reactors today, they use 5% uranium-235 atoms. It's got to be enriched to 5%. And then for medical isotopes, we're talking about 20% uranium-235 atoms. And we heard Iran in the news recently. They're back to doing weapons-grade uranium. They're at like 60%. From 60% to 90%, I understand, doesn't take much. But so 90% uranium-235 to make a nuclear weapon or nuclear bomb. So now our nuclear waste and our nuclear reactors, they're here or here. So to make a bomb, well, even like I say, Iran at 60%, that's still not good enough. So can nuclear reactors and nuclear waste blow up like a bomb? Well, They're not at 90% or 80% even, so therefore, no. All right, one more. Okay, plenty of energy in used nuclear fuel. So this is, again, for typical light water reactors around the world today. The uranium gets rich, like we say, to 3 to 5% uranium-235, comes out of the ground 99.3% 238, gets enriched to 3% uranium-235. And then when it comes out, it is down to 95% uranium-235 and some of these other things I don't understand too well. But anyway, 97% of this is actually reusable. And then here's a video I would recommend, the Ultimate Nuclear Waste video, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Nuclear Waste. And let's, and just a bit more here. 3% enriched uranium goes into nuclear reactor, and on the right is how it comes out when spent. Fast reactors can use the reusable material. Russia has 2 fast breeder reactors in production today. One came online in 1980 and still operating today. China, India, and Japan also have fast breeder reactors. So now also nuclear produces heat, so we can use that heat for producing hydrogen, synthetic fuels, ammonia. You know, we can use it on remote grids, small grids. Desalination, they use that at the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant today in California. Grid electricity, obviously, that's very much the primary use. Industrial process heat, not too much today, I don't think. That requires pretty high heat. But Dow Chemical signed on with one of the newer reactor companies that should hopefully come online within less than 10 years, X-Energy. Residential district heating, Switzerland uses some of their nuclear for that, mostly electricity, of course, but some for that as well. All right. And these are kind of, generally speaking, the type of reactors, large conventional reactors like the CANDUs and South Korea's APR 1400 gigawatt or megawatt reactor. The United States Westinghouse AP1000, they're all in this category. That's pretty much everything online today is this style. Small modular reactors up to 300. Ontario is building that GE Hitachi BWRX 300. Saskatchewan wants reactors about this size. Their grid's too small for anything much larger than this. So these are, you know, you hear the term maybe a fair bit, SMRs. Now, micro reactors, these are really tiny things. As you can see, they basically are shipping container size. They're supposed to help with off-grid communities, remote mining operations, maybe island communities, that kind of thing. So, yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Next is, this is a company I've been chatting with a little bit. Again, it shows reactor the size of a shipping container. And this is one this company claims they'll be able to burn waste. Like I said, maybe we want to pull it out of the ground to use it. Others claiming they will burn waste are Moltex and Arc Nuclear in New Brunswick, Canada, Nucleo in France, Oklo in California, and Bill Gates' TerraPower company. So nuclear fuel, how long is it going to last us? Some say, oh, we shouldn't do nuclear. We only got 30 years of uranium left. Yeah, but what if we do fast breeder reactors and some of these other reactors that'll burn the waste? Well, then we got, instead of, you know, we saw on that slide there, there's the 97% reusable. Well, if we do in fact use it, then we got 4 billion years worth of use. So now a fast breeder reactor, EBR-2, operated for 30 years at Idaho National Labs in the United States. Bill Clinton and John Kerry canceled the EBR program in 1994 just as they were ready to commercialize it. They were ready to go. This thing was operating, doing its thing, eating up nuclear waste and all that kind of thing, and operating just as they wanted, just as designed. But well, people don't like nuclear, so they pulled the pin on that one. Now, another future thing is earlier this year, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, their Nuclear Energy Agency division, produced this 100-page report, Unlocking the Hidden Value of Nuclear Fuel, the Societal Benefits of Diverse Material Recycling. So what could we do with this nuclear waste? Well, Bill Gates caught on to this, medical isotopes, in fact, advanced medical isotopes, that being targeted alpha therapy. When you get radiation treatment for cancer, how about we kill only the cancer cells? Well, that's what this does. This will kill only the cancer cells. Bill Gates has his nuclear reactor company is called TerraPower. They have a subdivision called TerraPower Isotopes. There was an experiment in the 1960s, molten salt reactor experiment. It produced some isotopes from that, and they were somewhat advanced medical isotopes, you could say. So he scooped those up and started that subdivision, TerraPower Isotopes. Now, the company I mentioned on this slide here, they also claim they're going to do this continuous electrochemical extraction. They've proven it in their labs. Now they need a place to demo it and prove some concept. It can efficiently convert nuclear waste into valuable products, including rare earth elements, medical isotopes, industrial isotopes, precious metals, new fuel for advanced reactors. It's an electrical, chemical, and pyroprocessing system with the flexibility to accept waste from both light water reactors and advanced metal and salt reactors.
Wow.
Hopefully we will approve this stuff, and hey, let's don't depend on China for rare earth elements. Let's suck it out of our nuclear waste. Now, for me, this this information certainly blows my mind. But anyway, now for a few closing remarks here. All right, clean energy produced solutions must reach price performance parity with fossil fuel energy in order to permanently displace fossil fuel production. In other words, we can't, like solar and wind, they don't produce electricity 24/7, 365. Fossil fuels produce it 24/7, 365. They provide ancillary services on an electricity grid, such as synchronous inertia, black start operations. When your electrical grid goes down to nothing and it needs to be started up from scratch, nuclear and fossil fuels can do that. And their output needs to be controlled by the grid operator as opposed to controlled by Mother Nature. So supply must match demand at all times on an electricity grid. So that's the importance of dispatchability or controllability by the grid operator. But however, fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases and air pollution and therefore must be replaced. So, Jeff, I wonder if you remember this question from 2012. Dr. John Morgan asked the following question at a nuclear energy debate in Australia in 2012. Question to those against nuclear energy. Given that the rate at which we decarbonize will determine how much warming the planet ultimately experiences, and given that we can decarbonize more rapidly if we use both renewables and nuclear power, how many degrees of planetary warming do you feel it's worth to avoid the use of nuclear energy? So that put them on the spot. Nobody answered that question. I don't know why, but they just didn't. So, all right. A few of my favorite quotes here. Numbers, not adjectives. I often have discussions with people online. Oh, but we can produce a lot of blah, blah, blah. Or there is many things, blah, blah, blah. No, not many. Those are adjectives. A lot, that's adjectives. How about numbers? So Sir David McKay, he passed in 2016. He wrote quite a book in, I think it was, I can't remember now, Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air. It was based on mainly UK, but a great book. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more, such as radiation, for example, so that we may fear less. Marie Curie. Oh, by the way, yeah, she's the one who discovered radiation, 1906, with I think it was. We are long past the point of picking and choosing which solutions we use to fight climate change. We have to use it all, said this guy. Generation Atomic, their nuclear advocacy, nuclear non-governmental GMO. I really like them. Very good. I'm biased. Split, don't emit. Split atoms, don't emit greenhouse gas emissions and pollution. All right, some books and documentaries I would recommend. This is a book called Sellout. This guy, Jim Kennedy, he looks at the United States. They basically gave up rare earth elements and thorium. They basically gave that up to China. China completely controls that stuff, and yet rare earth elements are in every computer and electronics in the world. So that's billions of devices. So if Donald Trump wants to threaten China with war or something, well, guess what? You're not going to be able to build any more military equipment because China will cut you off of the critical materials that you need. So factfulness, I mentioned this earlier. Hans Rosling, he started Our World in Data. I showed some of their graphs. He had that TED Talk. It's only 10 minutes, the washing machine. Juice, How Electricity Explains the World. It talks about Robert Bryce went to countries like Bangladesh, excuse me, and etc., poor countries, what it's like to live without electricity, so that us folks who do live with it and take it for granted, hey, here's what happens when you don't have electricity. As we said earlier, you don't get education, you don't you don't have time for leisure or recreation, etc., amongst many other things. So we need electricity 24/7, 365, all 8.2 billion of us.
Mm-hmm.
The Power of Nuclear. This guy is a writer out of Denmark or Netherlands, I think it is. He was typically anti-nuclear just because that's what you're supposed to be. And then he thought, well, is this stuff so bad? So he actually took the time and read all the data and all that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, he became a pro-nuclear energy guy and wrote this book last December. Nuclear Now, Oliver Stone. He did movies like Platoon, and I can't remember what else. This came out in 2022. You can watch it for free on YouTube. Hour and 45 minutes. Highly recommend it. Vaclav Smil, University of Manitoba, Professor Emeritus. So I got to throw him in there in the home province here. How the World Really Works. Numbers Don't Lie. Stuff like that. Very good. Material World. 6 raw materials that shape the modern civilization. I can't remember what's all in here, but salt, copper, sand, stuff like that. And then Pandora's Promise. This made its debut on CNN, of all places, in November of 2013. And it was done by Robert Stone. If you look at some of the films he's done a fair bit of documentaries for PBS and that. Anyway, Robert Stone, Oliver Stone. Well, none of us obviously are going to make a nuclear documentary. Our last name isn't Stone, so we're not doing it. All right, summary. As this is one I showed earlier, we got 47% of people on Earth living in electricity poverty. I believe it's more than that because these 16% don't have enough either. And our energy consumption today, and it keeps on growing and growing, and fossil fuels and CO2 emissions keep on growing and growing. Here we see our carbon budget. We got not much left at all, so we better get going like fast as hell, which includes nuclear. And finally, this book is going to be released maybe September this year. Dr. Timothy Gregory out of UK. Young kid, 32 years old, Going Nuclear, How Atomic Energy Will Save the World. I somewhat agree with that. I don't know about save the world, but my opinion is that if we don't have, if nuclear isn't our major source of energy, not just electricity, but energy, I think it'll continue to be fossil fuels. So, and there's the last slide there.